first of all, I'd like to express how appreciative we are to have the opportunity to interview you today. So thank you so much.
Okay.
We'll start by asking some questions about your early life. So when were you born?
Kia the Katukina. Paging Chidong could get to duty.
any
That is to shame.
could get to the
Chidong could get to the
Yeah, 1967, and he's not really sure about the date.
Where were you born?
Kesa di Terawakare. Hasane. In a kilometer ship to such a Pembos such a
He was born in Pembo, which is around 40 kilometers from Lhasa, the capital of Tibet.
Did you have brothers or sisters?
Omasumire. Puchik Chunga Puchik the Chunga Pomoni.
He has 3 younger siblings, 1 younger brother and 2 younger sisters. Yeah. He's the eldest. Yeah.
What are they doing today?
Consumoro.
Now, the call.
That's a very ordinary.
건숨과 별이라. 거기서 가르치고 그랬는데.
가르치기 나티서.
그냥 대화여라.
저보다 유들을 내가 다 저거는 쉬우지 않게 지금에. 그래서
그렇지.
고바스 게임도 안 갈래야. 그래. 다 중슈대 아니리 보면 중슈대 아니리면 신나니디 답에서 총으로 시작돼요.
Yeah, his youngest sibling, she's a nun, and the other 2 siblings, they must be in some kind of small business, but he said that he's not really sure what exactly they are doing, and they don't really talk much about it.
How did your parents earn their living?
Pama, you mean here, or, I mean?
Early life, so in Tibet?
그래서 별로들이 그저 저하고 안 되게
별로 별이 이래 걸로 저거 정말 신발해. 그래서 신발. 다 대지를 건조 신가 되게 샤네. 플라스를 수입변에 총원으로 잡대도 와. 그래서 다다 건조 저거도 신래래.
Early life, they were, when they were in Tibet, when he was young, they were farmers. Later, they moved to Lhasa, and then they indulged themselves into small business. But primarily, they were farmers.
Did you attend school in Tibet?
Lobta 저희
롭자 총색이 롭자를 진짜 ngawat 받을 좀 해줘. 그래.
He went to school till like 5th grade.
Can you tell me about any memories that you have of Tibet from that time?
중도 별로 직대다. 표기도 된된 도시라 아니 간대 도시.
중대 배근해주도 망부해요 그러다. 야. 중대 랍다도 되는 주听요래. 라루 초가시 베네 주요래. 아니 또 친구가 내주든지 또 삼루탄도 가라. 다야 망부르시도 와. 다이는 단대 시에시람나 가르시고 야래 꼭 안에 주고 고쳐야스 김도.
He says he has so many memories from his childhood, and there are memories of him going to school, there are memories of him going after the animals, looking after the animals at his home, and he says there are so many that I don't know where to begin, and if you are asking that, tell me something from your childhood, then he's not really sure where to start. Yeah.
그래도 사실은 춘주가는 게 템베나로네 집슈르부터 춘주가는 다 단다고 시제 차법합야가 아니 쇼게 차법대에서 법 별이는 레스도 와 있는 이만 인지 차법하고 말아. 차법대에 법 안 디자박sel라네 틴주라루 틴주님도 치 아니 라루 틴주 야리 간도와 빵빵간테 뢰샤는 소소 탭잡지 동tiptinja lo 빵가는 예 되거든 예용기 추기 자차차차차 고야다 빵가는 매도 춘주 틴데 제는 롱부스부 겸디고 서버디 야가는 촌으로 의문도 따뜻히 예심나로야 따뜻히 양조 변나 조투비나 디사제니마 춘주고 조사사세들은 예바도 지 조도 생거든.
So he said one of the most happiest memory he had from his childhood is that he would go to look after the animals like goats and goats and lambs, and then when he would go for them to do the grazing over the mountains, and then animals would take their own time, and he would be there reading some book. And then while he would be doing that, there would be little flowers around, and then he could hear the water running in the right adjacent to him, and there will be cold breeze of wind. And these feelings, he said, we don't get it in India, and it would be mostly during the summertime. And he missed those moments a lot, and he really wished that if he ever goes back to Tibet, he could do that again, and he would visit those places.
That sounds beautiful. When did you become a monk?
다 저신 로스는 직동급계 계주 켜숨 임바이 배진 계주 켜숨 롬축도 하시면서 진도 고바스 임바이.
Yes. Around September 1983.
How old was he?
사진이네. 적숨 집시 신지를
Yeah, 13 or 14 years old.
What was your experience as a monk in Tibet under Chinese occupation?
측대에서 담아서
별라 유두다 그냥 구쇼신 별라 유두. 아니다 완전 간나기 슝월라. 갸갈 말링게라 별라다 구쇼기 냠용 한데도
또 간나 슝기 별이 왜 그러잖아 슝기 시주 쏘고 말해다 첩식이 내다한테 빼면서 교로와 뒤교고 임바 때문에 있는 건 죽잖아 슝 gem비 교르다 그래 뒤 gem비 겸는 종말에 추요래 난 대체로 추요인 게 케어래 그래서 간나 슝기 첩식이 내다한테 야고 쉬우나 라 마디 리마르게 할 그래
he said that the Chinese policy in Tibet, for Tibetans in general, especially the monks, is really poor. So that's one of the reasons he's here today. He won't be here if everything's good there, right? So the policy under the Chinese government is really pretty horrible there, and that's why he has done he has participated in protests, and he's been in prison, and that's what he's saying, that the experiences are not good, and that's because the overall policy is really bad towards Tibetan.
그래도 어쩌셨나? 자나 슝기 자dim나로라 팀나로리에 최대 장모였어요. 이미당 것도 차와치가 주도 그런 장모이가 말해. 맞다고 차시나 나랑 차와친도 여러봐. 이나 공배나래 차와치야 자나 슝기 가주슈 촉지. 다디 촉진디 내려고 지고 말해. 다들 라야 체도 다 탑시 망부체네. 자나 슝기 다지 근데 촉진된 얘기를 된돌에 잡아치니 아니 미랑 오신체 아니 님버체 체네 잡아치도록 다 되게 저좀 나라 장무였어요 봐 원래 장무 여러면서 요마라 다 빼주주지로
And he's given an example. He said that in Chinese government, their own law enforcement, it says that everyone has right to religion, right to practice any religion, but that's not true. He says that's not true because to become a monk, they have to get a permission. And if the right to religion is really, if it is really followed, then no one has to take permission for things like that, right? But if that's not fully implemented, that's why they have to take permission to become a monk. And to get that permission, they have to go through a whole lot of process, and they have to go through the Chinese officials and bribing them. You know, they have to entertain them, and they have to make them happy to such a level that they get the permission to become a monk. And that process of getting these permission is really tough and expensive too.
Could you describe your typical day as a monk in Tibet?
나 별라 그냥 고쇼인데 니마치글라다 가르가르 치고 예매다 직쇼 원랑은 내신 건다 많이 예매도 지금.
다 뱀미스만 거다. 뱀미스만 거래. 쇼게 배지 추정가와서는 거요. 쇼게 추정가와는 랑네. 다 도와는 시 랍드는 시 띵디 땅제 칼라서요 말에. 쇼 사무소서 소르와. 칼라 뒤숨자 소소 그래. 쇼게 칼라 속이 속이지. 아니 디님도라 룬지 막도 주야 먹고 싶어봐. 막도 주야 돼. 다 추정가와 나는 추정 고파도 막도 주 잡지. 일이 죽줘야 줘봐. 추도 고 봐도 죽제 고번에 중리 봐도 진짜 저루래 베제티야 줘봐 베제티 중리네 주니오 봐도 인공 칼라 주주래 다 되게 바라들 칼라 조고세 아니야 주신랭아 주용아 주도 지치 그러봐 근데 디네 주도 니번에 주도 시버 봐도 데려 접어줘야지 디베트 치도 같은다 대체 주도 시번에 주도 주보 봐도 양교 비리래 진짜 저루래 주준이 주저 두 번에 주저 dumbo 봐도 권다 칼라 주저래 다 dumbo네 아니 야가 있나 주저 죽지 제가 공가 있는 주저 주바 죽지 제가 딘저 봐도 접어줘야 돼 그래 아 디네 출리네 양교 디링 빼지 진교 접어줘인교 되게 깨르종지 쳐오래 많이 해도 주저 중니 제가 당보 내 차로 그래
So he has a really busy schedule, and he would usually wake up around 5 a.m. in the morning. And he said, unlike here in India, there won't be any bell ringing for them to have breakfast or anything. Everyone has to cook by themselves. So around 5 a.m. he would wake up and he would prepare the meals for the day. And then there would be a lot of things to mug up, you know. I guess that's like our assignments and projects. They have a lot of things to read, and they would have to put those all in their mind, like mug up everything, so that they could later give those tests to their teachers, and they have to say everything without even looking at paper or anything. So mugging up those things would take around till 9 a.m. from 5 a.m. and 9 to 12 they have classes of different subjects, and 12 to 2 is the lunch time. But 12 to 2, the lunch break, in between the lunch break, he would go and take some tuitions, like take some personal tutorials from other monks. And from 2 to 4, they have debates. Like those debates are pretty intense, actually, among monks. And they would participate in debates. And from 4 to 6 p.m. they again have classes, and 6 to 7 is the dinner time, and right after 7 p.m. they would again have debates. And in summertime, he says the debate would go till around like 11 p.m. but in winter it would go till around 10 p.m. and then they would again come back to their room and prepare all the notes for them to study for tomorrow, and by the time they sleep it would be around like past midnight. Yeah.
Who were your most important teachers?
그냥 개개인 계시슈 미선낭이라 개개인 계시슈로 수수이
개개인 계시슈 담보 까갈람이 그래 이제 그러와 까갈람이 순주가는 라브라 니마 담보 drove 개개인 저러와 그래서 되게 말이야다 디믹 담보 대대라 디네 니바 안에 개개인다 공배날 개개인다 배는 알 차시나 공배날 개개인 시월 베저티니 개개인 시 진짜로 다 단다고 차시나 다 니메지나로 람도 체든지 정원이지
So the teachers in his life, the first teacher, he said, was the one who taught him the Tibetan alphabets, of course, right? So like in English ABCD we have Gaga Ganga. So he said that's the first teacher in his life, and he has just used a beautiful phrase saying that was the one who has given him the key for further education. And he had 4 teachers at his monastery who would be like his mentor to guide him on different subjects of studies as a monk. And then for now, His Holiness, like for general Tibetan, His Holiness, he considered him as his teacher. Yeah, that's the line he said.
Could you describe your experience involved in the protests in Tibet?
그럼 gembuga도 냠용 별로 gembuga도 직권에서 오시다.
gembuga디 자외 던지게 나오는 시리 변화로리야 그 간지도는 라와요 말에. 그봐. 다 니방가 주춘주가로 있나? 거기에 주고 말어. 춘주가나 겨울음지 제뉴요 말에. 겨울음지 고와이 제뉴요 말에. 이나 겨울음지 사지 그 밥자기 배바 임배 주고 정신기 즉 신으로 하시도. 지금 도대 소소서 내려 보셔 봐. 겨울무지에서 누가 남 세미나를 하고 말들이 즉 체험 고바짬기 가져올래야다 즉 안에 간절히 주나 즉톡 주바 삼사로 지어봐 딜리기도 다 대갑라 준주가 랍다 좀 갑라 빼미시 담보리 최사든서 제조고 말잖아 중으로 다 데레 다 이내양 디내야 즉다 고면나를 다 잡아치야 고급지라는데 제 아니 고면나 찍리도 그 주변에 가지고 자시는 대본 고면 잡아래 대본기 공부디 뒤인데 막 강바대 당다로 때문에 잡로 강바 참아 떨어져로 다 집어만 보셔도 수도래 가두도 그래 간제도 그래 가르치는 또 그래 사실도 뒤집히셔야
And so he's answering this by dividing it into a few parts. So the first part he answered was that, like he mentioned before, there was, you can say, there was not a single human rights which was implemented properly in Tibet, in China. And he says that when he was really young, he has never seen a portrait of His Holiness, not even a picture. And then, of course, while he was in Tibet, he had never seen him in person, right? But being a Tibetan, he said there was always this feeling in his heart that there is someone called the Dalai Lama, and that feeling gave him so much of power and so much of happiness. And even whenever he would hear about him, that would be a really rare occasion to hear his name, but even whenever he did, that would give him so much of happiness. And he says that when he was a monk, there will be sometime there was a condition that half of their monastery would be destroyed, and they were so young that they didn't know who has done it, and then why would they do it, and who are the person behind this.
다 대지를 어느 시내에 공부해날래 어느 하쿠도 다 지네 로게 레온디가 고수이고 기로 아니 디 고수인디가 안타디 자나 슝그 남주가 저 친주가 롭전 때베가 자나 슝기 베리 공대다 자나 슝 야부 임바다 별에 야르게 담바다 딜레 마모 셰디 고르와 다 된서 상황 주면 임바지 그러봐 아니 신이 소소의 계급사디 나중에 계급들이 야잖아 개미네 중국식으로다 자나 좀 레면도 와서지 나중에 계급 연구 미시래도 왔어 나중에 계급대 아니 간제스토 다 직동국 장갑 중하고 우리 아니 개미 초도 왔어 다 딘데 하고 오는 것도
And then now when he was getting older and he became a monk, and then gradually he understood the whole concept of Tibet being a free country and then being occupied in 1959. Because when they were young in Chinese school, they were taught that Tibet has always been under Chinese, and then Chinese people has done so many things to develop Tibet, and all this brainwash they have been through. But when he became older and when he was a monk now, then they gradually understood everything about what's really happening, and we had our own country, and how much brainwashed the Chinese has done on them as a kid. And then before 1959, our country was our own free country.
다 딘데 지걸로 아니 시내 당원에 전화숑 그 별이야 전주슈 제샤 아니 겨울은 친다 표만 50이 자갈이야 저주 계샤 당 안주 인민의 차시네다 단지라고는 시를 잡아치고 전에 라와면도 다 라와면 좀 망고 슈통인 것도 같으니 아니 대단님도라 소속이 다 별거 루규 탭딘데 자고도 루규 탭딘들로 온도가 당 안주 소속 계급 연결시 롱버시 레도 왔은 거 마시나 어딘데로 제제 딱 gem부 겨고하기 금지적 대례다. 어디지라다 말하는.
And then now, as he said, that they were becoming so much aware that these things were happening, and then we had our own country. It wasn't that it was always under Chinese. And while understanding this concept, the actual concept, there were so many books that he found, and he read all those, and then the history books on Tibet, and then these made him realize that there are no rights at all in Tibet, and Tibetans are facing all the, and then now everything made sense. That was one of the reasons that he would participate in protests. The initial.
아니 대간라 김지 찍디 가르려 그랬으나 다디게디 룩주다 무유 채널에 하고 와 무유 채널 가잖아 좀 가르쳐도 직 통고로 와 룩주 채널 직 통요로 와다 대간라 숨바지 가르려 그랬으나 직동급계 개주 겹둔기 진다 고와 저번 뉴스닥 숨리 봐요 뉴스닥이 그러셔 뉴스닥이 영어로 미치가 어리 쳐져 나로라 좀이 덥다는 게 된생아 또 깔롭시 나머리 뒤깔롭 되나도 뒤깔롭 되라 잖아 슝기 다직다 차바다 TV다 룽진다 된전 나로라 배 겨울로 무슨 쇼지가 두자라 거다 배 개가 과제된 것도 슬람 배 미스 두자라 그래 다들 납조가라 만들었다 나스단 그러와 이제 너 개배 겨와 김제 찍고 호텔을 투되었다 아리 줘잖아 말이 워싱턴 DC 그래다 아리 줘잖아 그래다 하나 파르멘트 나
And so the first reason was that when he understood every concept, and then he understood the actual history of Tibet being a free country. That was the first reason. And the second reason he said was in 1987, September 21st, His Holiness the Dalai Lama gave he attended a talk at U.S. Congress in the United States, and in that talk he explained about the 5 basic human rights. And when this speech of His Holiness was broadcasted, Chinese government kind of went crazy, and then they would write awful things about His Holiness all over their media, in newspapers, and then even in news channels. And that was the second reason that he went on for the protests.
대체네 아니 대제기 니마 가시야질라 다와 타가라는 게 제주 캡틴 구베 다 저번 뉴스다 뒤나 망가 죽게 메겨라 뉴스다지를 말해 뉴스다지를 장으로 대송으로 봐 대제기 아니 니마 두고 제라 뉴스다 뒤나
So September 21st was the talk given by His Holiness. On September 27th, 1987, was the first time he participated in the protests in Tibet.
그래. 다들 캠비 개발할 때 배진 직동급 영업 중하고 제라 쉔기기 다 춤슈를 캠비 캠니다 팀을 당고쳐야 되고 그러봐. 영업 중하고 제라.
And so this protest or this camping, he said, this protest against the Chinese government was the first camping by younger Tibetan or the Tibetan people in general after 1959.
다들 캠비 개발 qabla 먼저 전지 시요래. 당부때 캠비 개발이 직접으로 비득치. 페랑지스. 아니 겨울음지 펠 배우요스. 자나슝 아니 페네마 치딘 치고요스. 아니 겨울음지 꾸지 틀 때 마셔스. 어디 비득 겨울탕세.
So during this protest, they had 4 main points that they were trying to tell the Chinese government. The first point was that Tibet is a free country, and the second point was that His Holiness the Dalai Lama should be able to visit Tibet, and the third point was that Chinese government, Chinese officials should back up from Tibet and go back to their own country, and the fourth point was that not a point to Chinese government, but just a prayer that His Holiness, may His Holiness live long. Yeah. So those were the 4 points on which they were. They have their own slogans and everything during the protest.
How did you feel being a part of the protests?
In Canada, 지슈적인 차대요라 다 게임 미망보여라 다들 저가 안 들어시죠.
다 처럼서 전에 다 제브래. 세번 뉴스다 잡두니 게베겨라. 뉴스다 둘랑가 조루체래. 뉴스다 둘이야 조루체도 게임베 잡고 도시제 당도 다 갑두디가 좀 진짜 찍바 민갑주 담바요래. 민갑주 담바 나로네 당도 파수 뢰케바 때때서 소소소 남주 가서래. 샘다니에서 그러다 진짜지기 다 제바다 오체래 다이는 거서 다 제니디 미뉴스다지 조래 뉴스다니 조래 뉴스다니 나로네 미직 마치딘 체리 겹로 대래 가르데 가르전 대르스는 니슈다니 나로 니 주저도 말해 파마치 부그래 주저도 마 다 군인이 작게면은 진짜 심바다 세버스를 제비나 미 파마를 심게 니자 망공으로 아닌지 아니 직마 된주 아니 되네 코 가르쳐서는 코게 간주 내주디게디 간주 심비나 가와치소 세비나 로카와키소 다 라소버와 딘데제 아니 소수기겐다 파마든들 제바치니 소리체 아니 코 게면나 마용스라는데 지당도 당부디 다 지금 제법만 못 챙겨내라 다 준준 유스터니 요르들에 무엇을 게면나 존이디 미뉴스터지 게면 침브레 직접으로 샤브레 다 이미 내가 저 게면 겹디고 초로데 가르스럽나 게면 겹었삼기 게가 통보도 말아 이나가 좀 베베기 베벨 약강이 요보다 야나슝디 되게 매버디 야나슝랑 아주 레이스트여로 걔가 좀 미유지기다 게메가 미유지 미 니버들 다 간다 랑가니레 매버 신고는 거지 야면은 세이레 야면은 심비레스 디링마 되는서 니 로야 매버디 먼저 하고 거다 대인도가라 진행의 로야 준주 인기로 니네 미지 강이 된저 통사 인기다 뭐 시그리 삼상의 시나다 종간 주구리 삼상의 시나다 된저 개미도 하다 가르쳐내 제 삼사로 지와 이나 간주 값도 두고 가는 간주 상물로 면은 가르쳐서는 신난다 소난다 비미사야 투 디게기 체드 아니 시구 줘버지 요 쇼세체 시워들 초라만 로 쇼세데 간주 면은 게임 받아데 나라 라우차시네 때문에 지 용구리 삼사를 제서 다 되래.
Yes. During the protest, he was one of the main participants, and this I can take out from whatever he's saying. But he didn't really say that he was one of the most important participant. But he said that. So 27th, it was the protest day. But on 26th, around 50 of his classmates gathered, like his monk, on his those who were those with whom he had classes, those are his classmates, and 50 people gathered and they decided to do this protest, and then they were very much aware of the consequences they're going to have if they participate in this protest. And among 50 people, after they discussed everything, around 28 backed up, and then there were just like 22 people left by the end of the protest. Among 22, one guy again backed up, and the reason for him to do that was that him and his brother both were in the protest, so they thought that one of the siblings should be there with the parents, because they knew that it would be pretty hard to go back home safely after they participated in the protest. So the younger brother was they told the younger brother that you can back up, and you can be the person to later tell our families and our friends that where was our body like buried, or what happened with us. And so the main feeling that he had when he decided to do this protest was that they knew that if they do this protest, Chinese government won't say like, oh, okay, we'll agree with you. They knew that it's not possible for them to just accept whatever they say, but they just really hope that we could at least give them a message that we're not happy here. We're not happy with whatever you're doing, and that's not right. So they were hoping to convey them a message about whatever they're feeling. And the second feeling that they were having during that time was that there was only two options for them: to die or to be imprisoned by the Chinese official. So these were the two options they had, and also they knew that after the protest they won't be able to go back home safely. But he said that at that time he was pretty young, and that's why they were like, okay, let's do it. They were not really thinking so much about the consequences. They were not afraid about this whole the result after the protest.
How did the Chinese react to the protests, both during the protest and after?
아니 gam이 군주다 protest kanzu gembu gyawadan gembu gyapshu ringala 군주기 가르가르 지음에다 아니 겹찬이 군주 가르 지음에
다 gembu 아주 캠비게야데 투주디 사니마 담브레 그래서 사니마디 공세로 캠비게야 망하러로 티체는 아주 캠비게야 망보라 그러다 하나 그래서 파고나 꼬라티 시캡 아니 티체는 다 담아 심브르다 캠비게도 가르 police 리도 그러 년도 봐 망불리기도 이나 망불리 투여 말해 사니마로 아니 레네다 맞아 스카가 거기도 이나 단저 무이트 캡데로 안 담아 망고슈레스다 망밀레 망불레스 아니 미망게 캡죠 쇼르다 미망 베 동라 망고 캡죠 체랑도 레델레 이나 무스 police 심바연도 심면도 가나 아니 간주 미망 상모로 팔랑가 술파 더러지 상모 심고야 요 말했어 세치제 간주다 미망 파 쇼게 임바 키랑스 마용스 간주님도 다 임비네 간주 미니슈다지 심브리 디가라 아니 겜비나로 냠숙 체된 얘기 포사인데 포사 시지다 보물 직심버다 미겨 돕는가 책으로 봐 아는 간도 되게는 당연히 못하나 야나 슝길 하사를 인교 야나 슝 시슝 요봐 레군 가면 레군 디고라네 아는 간도 되게 상관 심소 나디네 정한 주셔야 해
And during the protests, they choose Sunday as the protest day, and two reasons for that. The first reason was that at Sunday was an off day for them, so they could do the protest more, like the whole day. They could take the whole day for the protest. And also on Sundays, the cops would be off duty, right? So there won't be a lot of of course, there were a lot of cops later, but the number was lesser than the usual weekdays. And during the protest, he said that when they started it, the cops started coming, the Chinese policemen. They started coming and they were kind of restricting them, like don't do it and all that. But they got a lot of support from the general Tibetan general public. And but when the cops started like chaining their hands and then taking them with them, but they requested the publics to like get out, to go out of the way, so that only the 21 people would be caught, because they were just supporting them. They were not actually participating in the protest. So they made sure that none of the other general publics were caught. But in the end, he said that 21 of them and other 4 young men and 1 Tibetan lady, they were caught right in front of the Chinese, like central, they're in front of the Parliament House. They were caught and then they were imprisoned on that day.
Could you describe the interrogation process after you were arrested?
네, 정말 주에 기도라. 엔디디다 근데 디와지레 지도엔 간데 디와지레 간데.
지금 디레 당고 가르치에 맞아서 근데 지금 고등도 가르치에 맞아서 그 가르치는 예배 때 종간 레벨에서 저래. 되는 건 좀 심해로. 뭐 캠비 캠빌레 유스기로. 그러. 아니 그 간이바 가르쳐야 맞어. 니바 계산해서 톱단 주의 있으려고. 먼저 니바를 선물 매스려 보여요. 다 디바고 딘소리지. 다 디바 내가 시슈지 가르치는. 다 கொஞ்சம் 가르쳐 그랬어. 양내 양도 니만 딱봐 디바 칠때 니만 지금 팅만 숨머지네 니데 요래. 지제디. 이러와. 다 디베 갑라 가르쳐서 키란조 로춘주딘데 게임에 가야돼 간데스 체소스. 그러. 키란조 갑로로 쓰레서 비게 갑로 레고 꾸니 줘라. 그러. 지금 미신다 레고 꾸니 줘라 섬데 디 케슈도. 다디 간조 요 말어. 나한테 주디 챙겨래. 간조 루귤로님 고천겨래. 먼저야 갑로데 미신다 케요 말어. 직대리. 고도 자나 슝게 도바데 가르치고라 건데. 디네 겨울은 친다 가나도 전주 당가나도 슝여로 딘주 디네 바 미다지 가서 지주구매로 선부였어. 디가서 저거 요 말어 주네. 오윤의 주랑 하려 봐. 저거 요 말어 봐. 그래서 내가 또 저거 알랭게 단지라는 시리 겨울은 제용으로 요 말다 못 저거 샤워. 그래. 빠르지 야고치 제용 요 말어 봐. 다 집어 어디래 저 제용 구디했다 나. 딘조 고려했다. 가두이네 저 망자 딘조래 가르치에 봐 가두이 제인 봐. 알아. 네가 가르사래. 그래 네가 가르치래 신기 유에서 하거든. 아니 걔랑 갑로로 수요. 다 망셔. 갑로 수래 사모단 수치스도 사모단 수치스도 사모단. 어디 고?
So few of the basic questions they would always ask is that one is why are you doing this protest, and the most frequent question which they would at least ask twice a day is that who is behind, I mean, who is supporting you behind this, And Chinese officials, he said, are really surprised that you guys being this young, why do you think about protesting, Because they know that they have successfully brainwashed a lot of Tibetans, telling them that Tibet wasn't a free country, and it has been always Chinese who has done so many good things to Tibetans. So that's why they were surprised that being this young, being born here, being educated under our administration, why would you even think about protesting on the first hand, And these questions they would ask again and again, and he said that maybe they had this thought that from India, the CDA government or the Tibetan administration or the Dalai Lama, they were arranging, and maybe they were sending few people to Tibet and then making this protest. They were the person behind this. So, and he said that this wasn't, of course, the case at all, because they have never seen His Holiness, and His Holiness has never been to Tibet, and they have not even seen his picture. So that he said that they always had this doubt that they were like person from India behind this, especially His Holiness. But that's why they would ask this question again and again. Then who is behind this all, and who are supporting you guys, and who are encouraging you guys to do this? So these are the basic questions they would ask.
What were the charges against you?
In Canada, 정원은 주도 디디 지레 라이저로다. 베지션나 미직세나 그런 미세니다. 정원은 저를 라이저 딘데로 직다 그런라 가리 김생 가릴 때니다. 정원은 다레 라이저.
정원은 죽여야 되다 데려다 계급이야. 계급 같이 다니세요. 계급이야. 뭐고 챙기. 데려다 민데려다 가서.
They were pronounced that they were separatists. They were trying to go against the Chinese government and then separate the two countries. I mean, they were saying that Tibet and China is one. That's what Chinese governments. What should we say? Chinese government has always been saying this thing that they're one country, right? But as this protests go on, they were charged saying that they were separatists and they were making this country go split in two countries, and that was the charge they were put on.
And then China kaptu tugal ngantu ti kaptu wal yebe kapki ngantu cheta ti chene ma kemyo chini mangbu chungurta ti chene ma pe mangbu chungore. Ti kaptu wal gejuta kupjuna lo ge zongan la chungyo kemyo ge zongan tin changma lo ya kunju gena shung karta or besten chepsu zombastar. Ta yor. Ta 대 지역이 니돈 게 되는 말도 gana shung chepsu zombasa 민খন 배주된 거요 말에. 개거 카트에 단계 사실. 특히 gana shung chepsu zombasa 민말라비아디 내가 두고 chepsu 이슬람샤비나 랑신기 계지나로래. 도나진이 망고리고 오르바. 다 건조에 chepsu 가르라고 먼저 종간에 chepsu 좀 매려고. 니돈 게도 아깝샤는 chepsu 좀 매려고 버다. 다 건조 가르라고 그랬으나 카트에로 봐스랍샤. 인규 전에다 미 안정원에 전 집어봐. 견나숑이 계지 나로래. 아니 대세 견나를 교바다요.
And in 80s and 90s, when they were the protesters, Chinese government would label them as political prisoners. But after like early 2000 and later 2008, 2009, Chinese government would just say separatists. They won't say political prisoner. And one of the reasons behind this is that if they say political prisoners, there would be a lot of attention from international media on this very topic about who are these political prisoners and why Chinese government has labeled them as political prisoners. So to get off with this attention from international media, they have labeled them as separatists, not political prisoners.
대 캠비 개회 qabla gana shung zongang 중조 무슨 도와 수익 가능한 민라요 다 가시 빠르라요 가시 민라요래는 롱바 칸에 이 마사지 칸에 이 신바인단 쪽바이 내가인 루프루인다 가리 찾 내주 찾아 다 간다 디데라요 zongang qab주디 zongang 여도 니돈 개로래 여대와 가서 동라 개다 초결학듯이 민요 개동 축제 가져 있는 지요. 다 자나 슝기 다 가져 딘주 배는 이동 개월 계지나로야. 자나 슝기 첩주 좀 미 개동 축제에 종가 죽실로 되고 자나 슝 가져 종가는 첩주 좀 전에 매를 보러. 그래.
And in 2008, during the Beijing Olympics, there were many protests all over Tibet by Tibetans, and so because that they knew that during the Olympics the whole international media would be there, right? So they did so many protests, and during that time he said that the people who were imprisoned, Tibetan people who were imprisoned, who were known to us, like. He said that there would be many who were not known to us, right? And the people who were known to us with their names and their pictures were more than 8,600 prisoners. And these prisoners, 8,600 prisoners, when we asked Chinese government about them as like political prisoners, they would say that we don't have any political prisoners, And technically they are, right? Because they are protesting about their own country and then politics, but Chinese would deny that they have any. They would always say that we do not have any political prisoners in our custody, and this was in 2008. And he's saying that's a big deal because they are political prisoners, but they would just deny it because so that others cannot put fingers on them, or maybe the international media wouldn't give any attention towards it, and that he says is ridiculous. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Would you like another paper?
Oh yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I think there will be enough.
How long was your prison sentence?
종원은 다와실이 되오셔야 말해. 다와시다 니마 가셔지. 가라스나 나도 열롱도 돼서 준조래. 그래. 종원은 다와시다 니마 가셔지 되래. 대야대 가라스라면 딜로델로 딜로다 개주 캡된 종원 주로와. 개주 캡게기로사 베벨로사 리고로와. 베벨로사 리온 두가라 아니 사살을 mellom사 조래. 그래. 곰바카기 클래스니고 곰바카 차와차상 좀제 라살을 mellom 초제다가 좀 최저 제고비고 디디 갈이야 세라다 제본 간디도안에 차와망고 종안을 추대요 봐. 디추디가나 콘조기 가르라고 그래서 종간은 뭐 추대죠 곰바카겠다 차와든 저기 종간의 연교 그 미디게디 마마르비나 아주 mellom 초와주고 매라고 다 mellom디 가나 슈무문에 차시는 mellom디 개좀뭐 쉽지 뜨고 그러던데 자나슝 최를 대바 유인이 말다. 자나슝 그 mellom촌에 디 mellom디 빠르게니 다 CCTV다 도서나 뒤에 계지나로야 별로 최대라 뭐 여사데 캡라지야지. 자나슝 최를 대바 유인이 mellom촌 주고 말해. 디래. 다 디리다. 곰박하게 나로라 잡아 대디니 디게 간주 마마르비나 종간의 인조가 잡아다 아니 디게 마마르비나 나도 좀 mellom촌 매스라 보셔. 대갑들라 찍네 찍대리다 곰바가디 야 디대고 자나쇼리야 총도만서 되게 보래 니네 벤지 군디 주바 벤지를 뭐지 군디 주바디 슈요 되고라 벤지 군디 주바게 테렌처다 도도라고 차시나 컨트롤로요 그래스 자나쇼나 컨트롤 말로비나 mellom초 두고 말레스 컨트롤로다 mellom초 두고 게임에 겨고 말 녀긴 겨고 슬랍샤다 도도체나 별로고란지 rồi thế chế này ngàn chỗ mà lừa rồi ngàn chỗ lừa thì cho nên chúng ta làm nhiều rồi làm cái nào chỗ mà răng giá rồi thành ra nê cấp sao rồi nê cấp lừa rồi tam bị yang chỗ ya khát tu trong cái là sim cái gì thì có chuyện mà ta cái nào chỗ chỉ cho cái là 약 보제 되나 공부하던 돌 약 보제 되나 아니 테레스 계시 샵식 내가 yang chỗ 무투 제비나 아니 기분이 봤으면 지 rồi 네번 이체거든 aslar. 텐도 가는 간조 쇼게 된 간조 마 야주 캡게기 진다 당부 잡아 뉴스다지 뭐 배지. 야주 캡게 진다 당부 잡아 뉴스다지 리게. 지동국 야주 캡게 진다 당부 잡아 뉴스다지 리도 쇼게 될이야 폴리스다 pombotin 저 가릴랍소스나 내가 브다 aslar다. 내가 마티레 로야디 금지 다 domne 대야데 다워 실락스 대브레 이나 간줄이야 네바땅 안에 침다지에디 같이 된도 차니 챙겨 말해 내가 블루투스 다야들이 다 내가 블루투스를 금지니 단진이 라고다 실 금지니 하고서 당부대 공박하기 려고 요스라 보르말로 나 면함 초가 죽으면서 니바 벤지를 묻힌 게다 간다 도도전에 개인기여다 하나
So he was in prison for around 4 months and few days, and that he said was that because he got really lucky, and there were 2 reasons for his release from the prison. And the first reason was that in 1988, around February would be our Tibetan Losar, our Tibetan New Year. And during Tibetan New Year in Lhasa, there's a tradition that there would be a big mulam. Mulam would be kind of like a group prayer session by the big lamas, and most of the Tibetan people would come there with kata. And this prayer session during the Tibetan New Year is considered really important by all the Tibetan people. And the monks who are participating in this mulam, this big prayer, are from Sera and Gandhin, the big monasteries of Tibetan. And these monks told the Chinese official that if the prisoners, the monks and nuns, were not released, we are not going to do this prayer. And the Chinese people were listening to them, because it's not because they really wanted to have this prayer session because they were super religious. This prayer session, Chinese government would use as a tool to tell the world that there is freedom of religion in Tibet. And during this prayer session, they would take footage, they would take pictures, and they would circulate among the in international media to tell people that, look, there is religion, there is a freedom for Tibetan people to practice their own religion. So this prayer session was really important for them to keep up with their international promises that they are telling people that they are keeping up. So when the monks from the Sera and Devung monasteries, they told the Chinese official that we are not going to do this prayer until the prisoners are released, then that was the first strike they got. And the second reason was that our pension lama, our 10th pension lama, he's one of the high lamas of Tibetan, and he told the Chinese official that release these monks and nuns. If you do not release, then the monks from this prayer won't happen. And also, he said that I'll take the responsibility that there won't be any protests, and it would be a peaceful, it will be a win-win situation for you and for us too. So, but looking at these 2 reasons, the Chinese official released him and his mates. But when they were released on 1988, January 21st, the Chinese official told them that this is just a temporary release for them. And if they do any kinds of other political steps against the Chinese government, that they would be imprisoned and their punishment would be doubled. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. While you were in prison, what were your living conditions like?
정관을 기우 쉬었다. 아주 다 정관을 다 강의 견제로 정신나. 그러와 당부알에 칼라 주고 니머지 경화를 하나. 그러와 칼라고를 주고 자시요 말이야. 아니 칼라라 주사는 개요 말이야. 대인한 간좀이 칼라 주고 경민도 칼라 시무민도 생각도 정관을 저버지야 치요 말이야. 곰대요 곰 마곰랑 물어봐. 그러와 대인한 간도 직다이네 곧 동간나로리야 갑디두걸 야 룽다고 찍으려가 좋다 납중가 구지를 캠프 겸이 팀만 당고 손두걸 지제 집에 가려 니다 다한테 빼뉴뉴를 갑디두걸 다 대지에게 되나 마치 개주 캡게 가서 당보러 왔다 곱주 담바다 곱주 거라다 니동 개던다 빼다 니다 고라고 하는 미신조 방고 중으로 봐 그봐 당 간주 갑려 야 니다 빼뉴뉴래 다는 루그 니다래 생미 니다 도도 semle 니다 다시도 Tibet can't have shooting a good year. The Tibet could be a couple of Pamata, Gigan Piju than the Tibet Guya. And get a chick machi and Pamala chick chicken on the get a dim machi and pick a Gigan chick chickens in surrender. 10 days to Jadua. And the chick chair, and the summer country Tibet Chibecablia, me, same one the woman so I have you. The thing is, Torna Karsna, Timaching up on that should gonda chuchu chupa ne jire gonda chuchu chupa ne sani shoge ge chuchu chupa pado sensenga chuchu jungni kupja chup시 chuchu jiga kupjuk chente jiga gyamnie yo ma dine jiga sha 안 고라도 얘기 gamnie che de mi bet chuchu ne mi shi 제고 gamnie mi shi gi ti버티네 아니 미니다 dine 간에 녀조부 주주서 차야 그래 지고 있어 봐 아 dine 갑로 계속 간주면 주 등고 있어 봐 가시 나 dine 집고 있어 이냥 간좀이 따부야가 질 주도 당분이 원예 예고를 시방아 벌랑고를 주도 증이 니 매버지 대버 강에 게면도 요즘에 주게 처음도 다 딘제기 미기 나르주 당당해도 같은 제가 가르쳐 간주 때문에 티버티니 내도 사와라야 개요 말에 정신나 그봐 다 이미 그냥 단지라고나 시리 디니 겨울오면 친다 먼저 별 슝경원에 직 제매로 삼상 그 독바디 슈부치기도 하고 그봐 다 딘제기 내주지 저금에로 라약 탑시 지기도 내가 요 말다 로주 티버티는 갑디도 라야 말 간절 정신나다 그봐 좀 나랑도 라한게 단지게 라이마 우인의 통 로규로 대전 탑주 전교로 봐. 어디 내려고 시대.
So while he was in prison, one thing for sure was that they were always hungry. There was not enough food at all, and forget about the taste or the good calorie food, nothing like that. But they were always hungry. And the second of all, during 1987 when they were captured, luckily there was really less physical harm they were doing to the prisoners, but he said that later in like 90s and 2000 there were so many prisoners who died just because of the physical harm they were doing to the prisoners. But during his time they were more of like mental pressure to them, and he said that sometimes the mental pressure are worse than the actual physical pain. And the mental pressure would be in a way that they would ask them questions and they would say that if you do not answer this, we will capture your parents or we will give a hard time to your teachers. And monks would usually consider their teacher as everything, and so they would blackmail them in such a way that if you answer this properly, if you do not answer this properly, we would harm your family and stuff like that. And one incident that he remembers and which was really hard for him, which was something he would always remember, is that from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Whole night they made him sit on a chair which was just like a square chair without any support, and he was hardly able to sit on that, and for entire 12 hours he was sitting on that chair. And there were four Chinese officials asking him questions, like repeatedly, all kinds of questions, like the questions which we discussed before. And the Chinese four officials, of course, they won't stay for the entire 12 hours. They would change their turn, and then another four officials would come, and they had this doubt, like we discussed before, that there were some people behind all this protest, and there were some supports they were getting from India. So they were trying to get this out of it. And he said that at the same time they were trying to make them kind of like hypnotized because 12 hours on a chair sitting right there and having this continuous question, not sleeping at all, not resting at all, would make any human kind of dizzy, and he said that maybe during these times some people would say something because they are so tired, and then they would say something which they normally wouldn't. But he said that in his case he didn't have anything any secrets which he was keeping inside him, because everything was just right there. He already told them that the reason for doing this protest was all because that reading histories and by getting older and understanding the whole concept, that he understood Tibet was a free country and all that, and there were no support from India, and he never met His Holiness. So he said that for him there was nothing to hide. And from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. it was like 12 hours straight, and then so many rounds of question. But he added that usually he would sleep during his normal life. He would sleep around midnight, and he would wake up 5 a.m. So it wasn't a really big trouble for him, because he was not a long hour sleepers, not 8 hours or 9 hours. And he said that throughout this interrogation and throughout this punishment they were giving, like the mental pressure they were giving, they were trying to get out of these prisoners that there was some support they were getting from India. And he said that even if they would try this thing for 10 years and there wasn't any, so they wouldn't get any out of it.
How has this treatment affected your life since then?
And that's one of the constitutive in the teen. Can I get missing on la? Candice the good what? Candice tesos.
정관은 주의해서 그래.
라오다 정원은 주로 나오시 대로와 디젤다 소소 missing on 찍다. 다 남기기 소소 다 missing on 저대 저와 딜라 디고니 삼록혼이 직강에도 직도에라네요. 지금은 삼록.
정관은 수배 금지를 때는 메테나를 강에 다치 제야서다 제요 말들은 메지 교체로. 그래서 캠비디 겸에는 비치는 단대 공부대요 기로. 다이 미네 캠비 개베 금지를 때는 정관은 수배래. 한 디젤은 수초용 유케브래. 다 간단 직대 주버대 침으로 봐. 디네 주버들이야 로범 기관 재미도. 그래서 당봉이게 단질라지 봐. 캠비야 개바 로드네를 semdachi tharwata va tando mashibaji lavati ko pe kibruwa kap didugal mende kepje seyin tande samdans ko teyo marwa ro yadamen zongan narju danje seyin samdans mendo mashibaji lava ko ragale soderwa digale dile gyumji dile dene tando tabyane sore ta kaso gyawrum chidanje sungju mangu shuara jeoroda ra
And he says, of course, it has changed his life, because if he wouldn't have participated in that protest, then he would still be maybe in Tibet, in the same monastery, being a monk there. But because of this, he had to run away to India, and but he never regret doing that protest, and he never think about it as a failure. And also, he said that he feels that he's lucky that he didn't die right on that day. They didn't shot him on that day. And also now, if you see this another way, he could come to India and he could meet His Holiness and he could go to many of his teachings. So it's all good.
I wanted to backtrack a little bit. How did you endure the mental pressures of imprisonment?
You mean, can you repeat your question, please?
How did you endure the mental pressures of imprisonment?
다 다기 뒤와디 랑차 조신 사라 아니 다 정원은 데디 샘기 강에 다 쇼친부도 나라와라 다 샘기 강에 다 딘주다 다 제일라야 그런 게 미스나 직 딘주 강에 로직 중세란다 디
배박 망고 쇼종한 추디어라 나주 망고 쇼냥데어라 이미네 배박 샘라 강에 제제 녀바 차워서야 된다 저 빼뉴뉴래 로 가르스나 가지고 배벌이야 팀모 이미 가르스나 가지고 낭주시도 낭주시다 가라도 팀모 이미 리슈쇼 가지고 배배 리슈나라 소금 써야 된다 소바사게 찍든지 배주 단 딘종한 줄 랑렌다르 되고라 가지고 두두기 대인두가라 샘나 강에 종가나 추 샘나 강에 차네 대제를 대 금지 될을 때는 뭐 집에서 이모지 요즘에 강에 고르 샤뇨메 샘나 강에 로 단지게 나오나 싫어 고조 강에 소야 답시 제소를 소두고면도 가나 가르스나 당봉 예습다 제로 봐. 종간 주고 이거 뭐 씹고 그런 게 가져지 돼요 이게. 그봐. 갑자기 메다geb지 세유나. 그봐. 단달라고는 싫어. 뒤에 뭐 가서 뭘 하야 돼 그러봐. 니가 종간나 대별이는 콘트 집에 가서 뒤네. 니 니마다 봐. 니 메제날 간도 셴도 교야 망쇼 종간나 교이. 그래서 니만 이제 집에 뭐 집에 뒤도 동거 되게 상마 강변에 내대로. 그봐. 강변에 쭉 세우라 간도 체지 내대로. 그봐. 제가 대 간주 베베기 리슈나로 민요바 차야사데 빼뉴뉴레 나르죠 가져다니 뇽바 레라고 제우 말다 가나 제 간주래 뒤요데 낭주기 자네 쇠바 낭주기 린다 아니 베바라는 게 뒤모임에 kum시 나로랴 대도 교와 당도 말레라고 지기
He says that Tibetan people, we do have this extraordinary quality that we deal with mental pressure pretty good. And he said that you will never hear that a Tibetan person died because of mental depression or mental. So he said that in prison, the first feeling, the happiest feeling he had was that he was still alive. They didn't shot him right on that day. So that was, he felt lucky that he was still alive. And he said that those 4 months in his life was the time he did maximum prayers, because he had a lot of time during the daytime. Despite the interrogation time, he had all day to do prayers. And prayers would calm your mind a lot, right? And he also said that the Buddhism, the thinking in Buddhism about the mental pressure and everything, the patiency, and he stressed on this word that being patient is one of the key contexts in Tibetan Buddhism. There's even when we start learning about Buddhism, being patient and the patiency is a key quality in that. And so these are the things which help him keep through the mental pressure. And he said, right after getting out of the prison, he never had any mental pressure because of that, like being sad of what all happened. That never happened with him. So he dealt with this very nicely.
근데 다들 기랑그 티베티나 시 니마가 다 아리리나리 유럽이나리 다 간다 그러 망부 중요해요. 대자마세 콘주딘데 그룹딘데 레지 MG딘데 샘기 MG딘데 망부 용제 접수 좀 벌이야 샘기 민주주의가 연구 인수요. 먼저 샘기 강의 연구 때예요 말아. 아무도 ям세로도 가르스. 대제일 아르네 연구지기다 아자라 줘래. 다들 견돌라 믹스에 슈두스. 모란기 미생과 대오면 교든들이야 롭종 제거 유스 다티 롭종 제니 나로리 키랑조 징내 종간의 주요 니네 차와 인교 견적이 로바 체제가 돌이야 생과 대오면 교든들이야 롭종 제가 용어도 쓰기도 그래서
아리네
doktor 전에 다 간다 딘데 깨져 중다 간다 doktor랑 이미 미시다 간다 봐 딘데기 내주 딘데 지 게메질레 내려 다 MG 딘데 망골레도 샘기 MG 인신 딘데 그러나 sabjong tega da jigda da phebala kyap gyocheni Dharmsala chepsu zombo mangpuro wangi ma rwa anda tini da ngonzo kila minyo chobo jo da sim dewo mengyo tenya yo maro chambu shena da subula ne chongki chengyo po neba kema neba chengyo tine mangpu yore karisa narcho tanya nigi subula chongki yongyo mangpu yore simla chongki chengyo halam tenya yo mare re cheta di ngonzo phebala ya mikse shubjo yorda da chige mitsoke da zongana tsuba tang halam masune midi nyoto ure sembu yusarwa.
And he said that the question that you asked about the mental, he had this question many times during his interviews in US, in Europe, and even there were some even there were some doctors who were specialists in mental health, and they would come and they would give them. They would try to treat them by asking questions, and they were surprised to see the healthiness, see the level of healthiness of their mental level, and they were asking them that how do you deal with these mental pressures so nicely that you are perfect right now, you're not going through any anxiety or any mental pressure. And especially one of the lady doctor from US or Europe, he said one of these regions asked them that I have many patients, I have many clients who are having these mental pressures. Could you guys help me to treat these people, because you guys have been to prison and you have suffered all this and your life changed, but still you have a pretty stable mental health. And also he says that political prisoners could show their physical pain, what have they gone through their body, like the marks on their body, or what, like kidney failure, or whatever the consequences they had through the physical punishment they got. But he said that you might be able to see these things in the political prisoners, but you would never see Tibetan political prisoners being, in depression or being suffered a lot from mental health. Yeah.
So how do you believe that your experience is able to help others who are going through mental pressures?
아니 계란기 땅 염용 땅 안저 셈바키오신 데다 직선방 안서다 뇽바도 마차에 직땅 안서 콜레지 여러와 디기 다 계란을 미션발라 펜토 투르베 삼거들
펜토 투도 배도 자신은 단단하게 얘기 심발으로 녀로 녀 자가날리는 가 개개로 다 다루티는 로 주룩도 개개 세대를 개개 제도가 롭질라베 주고 미메치 이 티야들 로야 주고 랍대 되는 게 말와 니 미디 미소야로 로 디도가 정신이 된 저걸 랍지 때문에 편히 주고도 왔대 보고 망고 쉬우지기 아니 지금 메들이야 딱딱 조트베 쳐야다 셈 딱딱 네트베 쳐서야다 저도 연구도 와 아때 마인베야 지도 나로랑 가나도 도스게 제 시에 디베한테 거 데려가래 어느 소소히 냠용도 시에 아니 강이 침부 trebe가로 동리 지단한테 좀 아주 배배기 곰시나네 시에 요리 최고 돈의 시에 요로 봐 니가 돈을 돌을 때 시에 니가 돈에 게 하요 봐 안다가나 시간 돌을 소소 냠용 돈에 때 시게 하요 봐 어디로 당도 비치면 강이 담을 채요로 다 전부 시에 나로 봐 강이 담을 싹 종간을 주야 인준에 강이 채사로 다가 뒤에도가는 밀펜도 여버지 근데 시에서지 않아 남석하도도 시에시요 그러봐 그 펜시 토고 여버 손에 시험죠 페마도는 시에는 가나로 네
And he says definitely this him talking about his experience and what he went through helps he tried to help other people, and he's a teacher now, and he's been a teacher since now for 16 years, and within these years his job, he says, is not just to make students able to read or write, but also his job is to make them a good human, and for that mental health is key. And therefore, while he's teaching not just the subject, but he also talks about his experience and also talks about how to deal with the pressure you get in your daily life. And he says not just the students, but for general public, whenever someone shares a big problem with him or someone is going through something really bad, he tries to relate it with his own experience and how did he deal with, and that, he says, kind of helps them. And he says that for him, he has two ways to convey to the people about the mental health. One is through his own experience, and one is through Buddhism, right? And these two works really well in conveying people about how to deal with the mental pressure they get in their lives. Yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
While you were imprisoned, were you able to see your family?
아니 정말 대슈링을 남미토에 중요해.
정말 대슈링을 다 남미 차산도 투야라요 말에. 그래서 담비 니듯이 남미에 발라다 그래서 진시 투야 니듯이 투야라 다 대한배 대래. 야 건조의 지도 건조 미게 대두가라 오신 봐 police다 돌아 오신 그 탑시 슈 제도와 탑시 슈 제네네 슈츠다 까마카시 투야라서 정말 대배 링들 발라다 빈야신다 진이시 건설해서는 빈야신다 인데 요령이 아우다 tin데 요래 건조 가시 다 팀마치 축듯이 투야라서 팀마치죠.
Yeah, his father and some of his relatives, around 4 of them, came to see him once during this 4 months, and this one meeting was planned for weeks, by meeting the Chinese officials and trying everything to bribe them or to try to impress. Try to request them to just make this happen for once. And he said that was just for a few minutes he was able to see his father and some of his relatives in Lhasa.
사직 도도지간데 대제 아니 삼노당 대해서 삼노당 대도가 아니 무쇼소서 발라 무비 있어 발라 우야디 김지거스나 발라 고람 딱지야 침보차네 미주쇼가 당부 있어 가르치셔스나 발라 고랑 발라디 납중가 국갑대 좀바 체제 종간나 추니 고랑 추주가 발라 도가 망고 줘도와 다 고랑 빠바차네 고랑 부종화 되어라 양교 그봐 양교 고랑 부종화 도와 주어라 안티 전에 세마 슈교 주서다 말에 빠베 두줄에 종화 고팀비스 네 부구 두줄에 종화 고팀비스 아 디디 무비 있으지 무쇼소서 다 무쇼소서 어디디 고랑 거 디디 셰스 되지라.
And so he just had one meeting with his dad, but after he was released from the prison, his father shared with him that his father came to see him once, and he was at the main gate of the prison, and of course the Chinese officials were not allowing him to meet him, and he just sat there for many hours, and then he cried. His father cried, and he said that his father didn't just cry for him, but also in 1959 his grandfather was in prison during the 1959 protests. So his father had this thought in his mind that he had to cry, he had to wait on this same gate for his father, and now he's doing for his son. So that kind of made him really sad, and then he was crying there, and he said that this memory of his father being there and waiting for his son made him realize that I did this for my father, and now I'm doing this for my son. And that was the incident that his father shared with him once he was released from the prison.
Did the prisoners know about what was happening in Tibet outside of prison?
And did that person make 그래서 또 정원은 대슈링을 다 배치라 갈갈이 종교에 대해서 하고에 직거가
있잖아 슝기 캡자 최고야 되라 그런 거들 그래서 이런 사과되게 건들 째는 거 좋아잖아 슝기 치료를 캡자 최고야 저래 계지나로래 자시바다 야보여바다 배대잖아 슝까지 신부 임바 딘전 내주디 얘들 딱 그래 사과 니마 딱봐 사과 딱다 째는 거 다 되면 돌아야게요 말
he said that they could get all the information which Chinese officials would like them to know, and they would get newspapers, but these newspapers would just have whatever Chinese government wanted to let them know. It would be all about how good they are in Tibet, how they are improving, how they are developing Tibet, and how happy Tibetan people are, and all these things. Rather than this information, they would not get any other information from the outside prison.
Do you know or believe that the people of the Republic of China are still treating prisoners this way?
니 단다에 좀 받는 가시 열와 콘솔에다 나가랑 직 이제 나가랑 신직
지유나 다 단다 종간나 유심히 저러 봐. 니돈 계고 공기 좀봐 배진 십중업주 얘기를 단다라서 라서 계줄. 니돈 계가 니돈 계네 춘다고 좀봐 저러 봐. 단다배도 니돈도 저다. 니돈 예유 저래. 이제 단지게 라인 바 계동 두개스 라인 바. 계동 두개 나로네 카시 로토로제 토보소요리. 로주주가 뉴스 생겨리. 도도 단달하대요. 그러봐.
군술다 강의로도 말 당신.
뭐 집어지게 알아. 카시에지 가로스나. 가와이니고요 말에. 배는 니돈 계가 좀방 안 좋고 매기. 삐지기긴 삐지기긴지 벽 제봉 잡아. 벽 제봉 잡아 그 좀배 제봉기 삐지기긴이. 개ger다. 개고 개고스는 뒤에다 간다 팀기 때문에 콘도 숨 니돈 계기 진짜 시베 도와지데 심브르 봐 심니 콘도 로제 로 가져서스나 로 제조를 제조를 다 단다 대도와 종간나 이민의 종간 가와요 이유 말지 밤에 니고요 말에 안주에 신고요 말에 고난주 밤에 하고요 말에 다 이민의 다 단다봐도 제니 단 이유 말에 다 나니 신에 개고되기 고난 나를 이기실래요 나 대워 인사가 이기지 뭐지 이나 이게 간에 구이 신고 말지 종간 가와요 신고 말 진짜 망고요 다 봐봐 시야 심는 종간 가와요 하고 진짜 망고요
The conditions for now in Tibet about the political prisoners, he says it might be worse than when he was there, or he says that it's not possible that it would be better. And he gave an example that in 2008, like we discussed before, there were more than 8,600 prisoners, protesters captured by the Chinese officials, and now among these prisoners, right now he says there are around 2,000 of them still left, and among them four monks which he knew them, like his teacher or some of the monks related to him in some way or another. These four monks were given life sentences, like, you know, and these 4 months, he says, no one knows which prison they were put in and what kind of what kind of punishment they are getting or anything, what kind of charges they were put on. Nothing about these 4 monks. But last year, one of the prisoners sent a letter to his home saying that he's okay, but that was just one sentence, and no one knew that from where it was sent. And so he says that this is just a small example, but there are a lot of prisoners, there are a lot of Tibetan political prisoners who the Chinese, according to the Chinese official, are prisoners and they are in the prison, but no one knows exactly where they are, and they might be already be killed, or maybe, you know, so they do not ever reveal the address or any other information about them.
Once you were released from prison, when did you leave Tibet?
변내주 급주 고직래래. 직동 급주 고직래. 가르절래 그래서 직동 급주 고직래 팀원님은 심지지 거다. 급주 탐발은 심지지 제래. 심야기. 급주 탐발로 심지지 제디오가 토요타래. 대선 여고도가 입대했다. 급주 고직로로 심지지 제래. 안에 토요타고 말다. 가르상간 저 로바카시는 로바 카시 심사리야. 망고치. 당간 좀 미시지. 라마 미시디. 안은 건좀 덮자고 겹자를 건다. 급주 직동 급주 탐박이 진다. 진짜 10회 뉴스지 그래요. 그러니까 진짜 10회 뉴스지 뭐 진짜 10회 뉴스지 니 모델라 안에 덮자고 겹쳐 줘요스다. 다 맞춰비나 다 망고시 승부로 아 뒤가는 것도 그냥 가지고 있는 수요인데 데레타 이미나 뭐시마 다 된도 망고시부지가 다 저거를 해보도 다 미망고시부지 심루고도 다 심비나 다 로제 로토고시부서 그랬을람 아 주트요래 다 컨트롤 심샹교 된도 제가 나 로제 로게 조용한 뉴슈 디네게냐서 여종한 권상모 조용한 뉴슈인데 종아대 유기를 당은 좀 미시체 간저 제일 미니체 간저 미축지 주타를 진짜 상마 안에 니마고 뉴스지 디겐 상마 종아나 대문 입을 주르다 하나
지동 국주 고직 기준의 시비들 미사실 있습니다.
비내레스네 토입니다.
So he left Tibet in 1991, April 21st, and he said the reason behind this was that when he was released, the policeman told him that that was just a temporary release, right? So now they were trying to capture them again in 1990. They did the first try in 1990. In 1990, somehow he escaped and he was not imprisoned. But in 1991, they were trying again to capture all those 21 prisoners they released in 1988. So when they were trying this in 1991, most of his family and his friends were saying that you should go to India, you should think about going to India. And in his heart, deep down, he never wanted to leave Tibet. He never wanted to leave Tibet, but he could see that his mates were imprisoning day by day, and they were capturing all the other mates. And then he said only 4 of them were left now among those 21 protesters. And these 4 people, so the 21 other protesters who were captured, now the Chinese, when they captured them, were doubling their punishment. They were like 8 years or 15 years in prison. So that's why he was encouraged to leave Tibet by his friends and family. And also he thought that now, if the Chinese officials were successfully able to capture him, they would at least imprison him for 10 or 15 years. And that made him leave Tibet in 1991. Yeah.
From where did you leave Tibet?
라산에다 용구로 라산에 용두가 남주에 있는 라산에 줄 호갈 수 칼홀로 되는 자가 별로 로초로 여러분 남주 로사랑 간주 로두고요 말에 가르상 간주 스미야기 police 잠사래 이만 지금 원래 난 간주 police 드링 잠비난 간주 드링 내주 라로 봐 다 내주라는데 다 내주랑도 규름 부르다도 시에네 거밖에요 말에 내주라네 간주 스파 장라 조셔라 장라 야가 대유나 먼저 파악할로도 조셔. 장라지 장서도 벽에 장당 꼬르겹 안에 이게 또가 강을 묻히어 봐. 또 강을 묻히를 꼬르겹. 안 강을 묻히네 마 배율을 마 주인 수수요.
아니 장 셔르라더라.
장서는 봐 되와.
장은 노트라.
안에 노블. 야레도라.
노블은 알레 엔데네솔레라. Yeah. So of course he started his journey from Lhasa like any other prisoners who live from Lhasa. But from Lhasa, the actual way to India is through the south, right? But if he would take the actual route from Lhasa to India, then there were already Chinese cops who were there to capture him, and then who would definitely know the routes they're going to take. So instead of the actual route, they took a different one. They went to north. They went to first north, and from north, and then to west, and then to south. So they did a loophole, to come to India. They didn't just directly travel from Lhasa to India. Yeah, and actually, if you see in the map, it's pretty close from Lhasa to India, but they didn't go through that one. They just did a loophole and tried from north, then west, and then south.
How many were in your party?
Yeah, the four monks. Yeah, that's the 4. Yeah.
How long did your journey take?
지질 ngari 파도로 모라지 게르다 비네 장고라 잡니 다 딘도 모레나 용바다 전에 배유 가드만 루파돌이야 니만 유시장 고샹소 그래 배유 가드만 루리야 파돌 니만 유시장
To reach the capital of Nepal, Kathmandu, it took them around 25 days.
아 배유네 주다 니만 숨제 고로야
Yeah, and from Nepal to India around 3 days. So 28 days, almost a month.
Did you have a guide for this journey?
ngari pato guide yo mare ngari ne nepali sajenalo nimo sumza guide me ngara도 디디 sabke 디네 nepali gi saja 디네 아니 총세지 도스 디네 마네 sabde네 고세 주면도 sabde나 고라레 디 요말 네팔이 사자디 가서 배우 sabke 되어와 아니 디네 아니 가서 네팔 기 미치 디네 실리아 페샤테 아니 고응 가서 가드면도 보다 게르마
So they started their journey from Lhasa and they went northwest, right? Till then, they had a Tibet's map, so they were able to go on their own. And from northwest to the southern border, for 3 days they didn't need any guide because they were able to follow the map. But then when they were close to Nepal and they reached a small village, they were not able to really see in the map because they just had Tibet's map. They were not having Nepal's map, right? So they, on reaching that countryside of Nepal, they hired a guide to take them forward from that point because their map wasn't helpful after that.
What was the weather like?
남식 안 돼.
남시 갑디도 남시 기분 남시 야고래 진짜 시바스도 진짜 별이는 진짜 시바다 가봤어도 차반이요 말 강내요 말에 이민에 밥이야 드시디요 말다 딱 배다 네발리기 배유기 산담들 강 쉬어다 님은 시다다 강길이 유용죠 그래 님은 시다다 강길 그래 딱 공가 강당요 여러봐 아니 강시다 팀도 찾아도 깨봐도 팀루거든
Yeah, and the weather was nice because it was in April, so there wasn't really like big snowfall or rainfall, but till the border area of Nepal, there were snows. Like it would always stay there because it's really cold, right? The temperature is really cold, so the snows were up till up till your chest, and then they had to cross these snows on their way here. But overall, there wasn't any snowfall, but there was snow. And he said that the overall weather condition was good, luckily, for them.
Did you encounter hardships throughout your journey?
아니, 또 강에 가려가지고 주문했다.
딸 랑가네 튀네 강이도 어디 지난 사야 키대로 잠버튼 키대로. 아니 가드면 루말리 기니마 숨 제중원에 아니 사야 참 좋아서 아니 사야 저 아니 랑가는 요섬에도 랑가는 니만 숨 되지 랑가 요섬에 매우지 어디 전에 딱 갑디도 대지 가서래 다 강이라고 지슈 데리다 조고마잔 네가 고마자고 와 대체를 니만 숨기 제일 아니 정관 춘주 네발리 정관 춘주들이 두고도 아니 비스킷 잡았던데다 레뉴야도 제자 어딘데 대대뉴야도 언제 좀 뉴스에네 다 어쩌더지다
So they planned their journey ahead and they had like sampas and stuff to eat throughout their journey. But around 3 days before they reached Kathmandu, Nepal, they were out of the foods and they didn't have anything to eat. And by then there was and they did have like little money, but there was not any like stores or anything they could buy from, and also they were it was just like a bare land, and they had to walk, and they had nothing to eat. So those 3 days was the toughest ones. And then excuse me. While they were close to 3 days of not eating anything, they saw some small Nepali countryside villages, and then there they were able to buy some foods, and then they were okay. So those 3 days was the hardest part of the journey.
Could you describe to me your life in exile since leaving Tibet?
나 변일린 야가란 결혼 기타 미스 직대시 결혼시다란다.
야간을 내니다 배율이야 니마 하셔슬라 그러죠. 그래서 로봇 배율에 자다 독자시고 나서 딘데는 주용 야가대 군두이제 안승이라던 로존체 안디네 다 망치가 개개 제대로 그래 로존 그 슈우도 게야데 대승이라던 로존체 대임바 될 로존 로숨락스 제대로.
After reaching here in India, he joined the monastery here and he studied for around 3 years. And after that, he has been a teacher till today. Yeah, so it's been pretty smooth. And as soon as he reached India, of course, he had a chance to meet His Holiness. And then now his major job is being a teacher. And yeah, that's about it.
When did you join the Guchusum organization?
구주숨 가두.
구주숨도 구주로 저래. 응아이 군다가라를 레베 갑들어라면서 구주 당부 중이나요 그러죠. 그래.
And Gujusum was started in 1991, so he was one of the first members of the Gujusum.
대체라 니돈 시내 니돈 주바도 구주숨 날래가 제라 구주숨 초고조체.
Yeah, from 2004 to 2008, he was the president of the Gujusum organization, and he's active. He still follows the organization, and he said that he were he was one of the first member who started this. Yeah.
And he ring the Gujusum lega chebe ring the jaga zonga le chim.
Yeah, and during like being the president of Gujusum and actively participating in every activity done by this this organization, he even had to go to Indian prison for 15 days in prison in India. Yeah, in Dehradun for 15 days.
What sort of things were you working on within the organization during that time?
And Gujusum la yudu Gujusum la 그런기 차글에 가래가래 나오나스.
또 내가 저도 첩지 내가 제로. 그래서 가는 저 첩지 잡죠 버려. 아니 니버텔라 담보디 첩지 내가 뭐 튼시야지. 아니 숨 니버디 변화 내주 자나 중게다 배돈 좀 메시지 요르바. 뒤도 깨지나래. 아 렌다다 제도 버치야지. 숨바디 첩지 좀 자가는 렌교 된줄다 면주다 즉 트레덴다 아니 지 초와다 된줄래 로름치 롭종다 로름치 과시로 다 내가 어떻게 숨가는 좀 쉬게 하시래.
So he had three main activities while he was the president. So the first one is, of course, to keep up with all the politics happening in Tibet and then in India, just to like integrate whatever he could out of these two. And the second one is that to get maximum information from what's happening in Tibet, the actual hardship Tibetans are facing there, and to bring out this information to the world and to broadcast this information as much as we can to the international media. And the third was to support the new political prisoners coming from Tibet, supporting them financially or like giving them support for whatever they could do for them.
Did you experience difficulties in receiving information from Tibet?
The 변에 즉 변에 당한 적이 술란 information 과에지 여러 와다 변에 방에 내수 딘수 내수 라야강에 여러 वेला
다 내수 라야 강에도 여러 와 그래서는 내주 때부터나 슈하 고비는 땡기도 연거와 만조다 라완로 받으래 레니를 냥야게 요뭐 내주 때니를 연거와 근데 강에도 여러들이나 고 답시 지야더라다.
And he said that taking information wasn't tough, but of course the person who is giving information from Tibet had to go through a lot because the Chinese were tracking everything, and he said that they had to be really, really careful about whatever information they are getting and about thinking about the safety of the person who were giving them information, and he said that this process of getting information is always tough. It's never easy.
Could you describe for me your life as a monk outside of Tibet compared to your life in Tibet?
아니, 그냥 긴두바지 김바찬에 별로 유두 당 대표님 개발인데 등일라지 개발직도 했어.
겨도 여러. 별로 유두 소소사제가 되어로. 대리도 밀ung배가 되어로. 개발직 대리. 인비내야 개발직 가요랬으면 별로 유두가 안 하시고 제네오로 되어로. 대 자가들 라완로 무슨상 한국 가르쳐내래 지 소소를 라완데 체도와. 다 뒤내려오시. 나 간다 독도체는 별로 되네 라완미도 대대네 미사제가 되어래.
Yeah. So the first thing he said is that when he was in Tibet as a monk, he was in his home country, and when he's a monk here, he's in someone else's country. But in Tibet, even being in your own home country, you were not able to practice a lot of things because there were no basic human rights there. But here you could do things you could implement like government does implement the human rights, and you're like free to do things, you know, here, but still you're in someone else's country. So it's just kind of like ironic, he says, this two situation, and that's pretty much the difference he can think about.
Do you hear any concerning news about monks or nuns in Tibet?
단다 니스 다 별로 유배 견딘바당 니 아니당 그런 식이 권내다 니스 직 자장부로 직 고해 중세
그건 여자도 개미도 지단다 자라 임버러와다나 미숨 계지시와 좀더 발로 미숨 계지시에비는 가르전 시에 요스 집을래 살다 불사할래 살다 그러다 아니 지단은 mirda 다 뒤나로네 자제 권제 해서도 마치지 아니 밑에다 잡아든데 니숨 두부이나 다 대회장 나가들래 막제 권대에다 막제 막권에다 상마대로 이제 계속 가르치 시기 파주주주 슬랍쇼 남사 아딘가 때는다는 공부하네 임바스로 가르치가 유임바스 저거 구사 다 든저지가 돼요 단다.
Yeah. And he said recently he didn't hear any concerning news, but he says overall it's always of concern, you know, because in Tibet, in Lhasa, if the Chinese scouts would see more than two monks talking in a group, they would just come to them and like, what are you guys talking about? And you should go ahead on your own way. And they would never allow even to have a discussion of more than two people there. So it's always of concern.
Do you think that monks or nuns should become involved in the political struggle surrounding Tibet's future?
근데 먼저 구쇼 된소이다 직 표기 잡시기 전에 직 여러 지슈지에 대한 캐나다 된데 지슈지나 제마이네 지슈지나 야구 여러 삼고대 디디 직다 그런 가능성도
표랑지 톱 표랑완다고 톱 소수기가 소수 심비나 아니 차베 접시는 주니 야구게 도움에 대마도 봐도 배바 임베슈가 접시를 채우다.
Yeah, and if Tibet would get, if we would get our country back, and if we would be a free country, then monks and nuns involving in the politics is not really, it's not really their job. But till we get freedom, being a Tibetan, you got to participate and you got to pay your country. And he says that till we get freedom, everyone should be involved.
When the Dalai Lama announced that he would retire from political life, how did this make you feel?
네, 고스조 이다가 찹시네 초 공부시기 소장 디 캐랑기 디 하고나 캐랑기 삼수 컨디션스.
다짜베 전에다 로범 중으로 와. 로범 중. 또 인민의 경우로 뭐지 고랑계 순구열이나 가두인의 소로가 찹시기 개인기야겠다 간다. 구지 레사가 민디 마키고마도 지 고랑 배배 인베찬에 배배 내도 가는 공부시야 돼. 고랑 랭기 유송요로 봐. 지 니네 배바디 경우로 뭐지 바보 제레스 기트들이 간주 제레스기 다 뒤무모 위에기 가서래 뒤신기 차도를 미치 차도로 뒤인도가 장신 개 경우로 뭐지 고난에 개인이 요로 뒤인도가 경우로 뭐지 가송서 그래서 섭지 개인 기물 되는 게 별로 딱 말했어 요로 그래 다 뒤인도가 단대 인민으로 왔다 지 간주기 뒤둑 슈서다 간주 있네 도알미는 간주 경우로 뭐지 요아삼사시 대 줘로 세 유는 매너로 경우로 뭐지 권내기 민디 유는 매너 간주 찌디야 돼 지부지겐 찌디요로
Yeah, when he heard about this, that his holiness was now not longer a political head, then it was a little sad to know about this. But he said that if we think about it broadly, then even though he doesn't hold the title anymore about the political, as a political, like let's say prime minister or like the political head, but still, being a Tibetan himself, he would never leave, he would never avoid the Tibetan cause, and he would be always involved in one way or another.
Do you believe the Dalai Lama will ever return to Tibet?
고스조다 별라 배기 레와요를 써무대.
경우름 진게 거두이네 송고도 아마 땐디 친죽디 별이야 계획을 했지 디 양상 송고를 만족해 줘 당하나로 다 이민에 경우름 진게 다 배두고 요바된 것이 기기 얘기 여러 봐. 다 이냥 만족문에 대리 연구를 경험한 배이 두고 생각하고 예 되는 좀 알아. 그래. 만족문에 그 답도 쳐야 될 얘기로. 그래. 딱하나 만족이 가르치고 그러시는 랭게디 로투브 지하게 배준셔야 들어.
Yeah. And it's hard to just say that he would return to India. He would return to Tibet, but we have to work hard so that we could make it possible for him to go back to Tibet. And His Holiness does say that he always want to go to the Potala Palace, and he would love to meet his own people in Tibet, but it's us who should work hard to make this happen. But it's we can't really say that it would happen or not for now.
How does it make you feel to see younger generations continuing to fight for Tibetan independence?
The Pebesho 인게든지 랑zen권의 직다 레구 지대저와 디고는 그런 삼수 관계조시도.
다 단대절라 랑zen 예줘요. 그래. 변화 되니 배워줘 랑zen 줘요다. 단답도 줘야 돼. 야나 되니 된저기 랑zen 줘서 유어 말다 도도전. 순수를 주고 임바. 맞아 랑zen 총이 수래. 야 슈니 말이 아리니 말이 여러분의 말이. 그래. 맞아 랑zen 총게 돼. 야나 슈르. 맞아 나베로 사이드가 별이야. 랑zen 고유스 라야 되니 야나 슈르 라테르. 니 딜을 랑zen 고유 없는 거 야 슈르 보래. 나 술을 보래. 제가 먼저 대전나 되니 저기 랑제 쯔스라나 나 싫어나 조명하랑 개르다 주르다. 진네들이 니네 안들한테 쯔대요 봐. 다티 쯔니 타르무 쇼지 쳐거도. 근데 경우로 문제겠다. 그거 먹고 싶으니 쯔니 다 토비아 매버지다 라 갖고 임버지 공부시니 다 내가 소리다 우면남디 개춘부지로 공원에다 우면남과 좋을 순고로 봐. 다 만족에 뒤념시 지어다. 분명히 변화로랑 제쪽에는 종하나 추유리 야가나 유니 첩시 내가 전에 구주숨라고 하시는 게 로축되지 첩시 내가 전에 가와가서랑 시해야 돼요. 내 세상에 야가나랑 시해가 유스라 보여. 랑지 주고 메스. 랑지 시해가 유스가. 개와도. 랑지 시해보다最원일이 개와도. 제가 대인도가 당한도 돼 전주 롱변나라 지 로션셔도 랑지 지 클라비네 시해대베 소리 지르면도 지기 저세 유디니잖아 숑레. 다잖아 숑라 가지고 저 두부레 말에 저가 저 두부레 말에서지 갖고도 와. 다 딜레 가지고 토비아 여바디 우메람관에 배준 셰샤비나 알레 공부 당보 지요 받아 간다. 되게 좀 뭐다 경험 제가 갈롬난 거 요르라 아니 지 가지고 배배기 있다 가서 발멘트게 다주 챙겨 주러 아니 미망하게 외로우네 다주 챙겨 주러 다미 슌게 가셔지다 차사보 여러 다 된저지 시에 대비네 딱 하나 삼삼 시에 대비 소리 지르다 하나.
And younger generation Tibetans in Tibet and in India, he's saying that in Tibet the younger generations are continuously working towards the Tibetan freedom, and in India, like us, we are working, but he's saying that there's not really a point. I mean, because we are fighting against the Chinese government, which is in China, right? And if we are protesting here, who are we protesting against? Are we protesting against the Indian government, or are we protesting against the American government? No, we had to protest against Chinese government, right? And so that's why he's saying that in India, if younger generations are working towards freedom, that's like speaking about it. It's not like seeking freedom. And in Tibet, if you are doing something, it's like seeking independence, and here it's like speaking more of. So that's the two difference that he has observed.
다 이면에 슌게 주고 랑제 저 초고 말을 라도야 말다. 셰 초고 말을 라야 거. 내가 저기 계럽도 주고 랑제로 와. 내가 저 톱다르다야. 주고 임바 멤버 사줘 다 되잖아. 다자다 배워 망치에다 가르서는 가지고 랑제 주고 메스라 보러 봐. 근데 저기 랑제 말을 따원이 내려고 말해. gerab lugunala rangzeri rangzi lumba rangze che menjo lumba de rangze zen thomjo yorwa ngando da lumba rangze gerab luguna rangzeri che rishun ke komshi geje shedan 와 창만 내려가서 잠만 깨미다 가가로 갔다 가나 저 쇼약 톱단 요들 이년 다 되잖아 저니 고바 도우면 더 돼야 들어.
So, but when he says that it's like speaking about independence here and it's like seeking independence in Tibet, but he doesn't mean that Tibetans in India are not allowed to think about the Tibetan independence, but he says that the middle way approach which was proposed by His Holiness is something that was agreed upon by the majority of Tibetan by voting, and that's why that should be a central idea by Tibetans. And can I gala you tamade point tamade
데려 가서 쉔지 요라다 야가이 나리 시계 가는 요 배배 쉔지 줘라 건조 단다카시 랑제 쪼르스라 보르바 오늘 쪼서 야가나로 말바 쪼서 게나 숑을 쪼르바 다 이나 것들 쪼 조금 말을 나가요 말바 고란주 톱다르바 데려.
Yeah, and that's what. So the Tibetans in the Tibetan diaspora, which is like spread all over, in India and in the United States and in Canada, they could. We could never say that they cannot work towards the Tibetan freedom, but he says that the actual place would be in Tibet because the Chinese government is right there. So that's what he thinks.
What is your hope for Tibet?
And can I get that? 표현하자와 제가
표현을 될때 시진념도 용구를 쓰면 내려오라. 발로를 야셔라.
근데 그냥 네 차기를 삼고
대 차기를 삼고요. 그래서 미 배우만 모습이 탑재 지역으로 잡을린 주바시 두고래. 아니 경우로 지게 발로 투브레스 지게 경우로 지 고랑기 있다 메질 하마디 표현에 투버치 용구를 숨고로 봐. 디첸다 로 투브레 삼고도 다 이나 가두 로 투브레스디 시에도 말아.
He definitely believes that we would be able to go back to Tibet at some point, but it's really hard to say when, but he believes that it would happen. And also His Holiness wishes that rest of his life he could stay in Tibet, instead of here in India. And then all of us going back to Tibet and living there happily ever after is his hope. And he positively thinks that it would happen. But hard to say when. Yeah.
Is there anything that you would like to add to this interview? Anything that we may have missed?
그런데 지원 뭐라기 지원 지금 멤버십 받는데 그냥 원래 직시에 유베스.
믹스 시에스 키미도. 좋아. 이민에 단계란 쪽이 pepe nezu tola tona che keche chi da nga tsa ma se mi mangu chi yorwa. Da nezu tenzu gyu ne kirantul ya chi pepe nezu tengan shenpe yorwa, ma shenpe yorwa. Te kaan shenpa da pepe na nezu kaan chungwa di, gyana shungu pepe tola zimbe si ju kaan yiba, kaan shenpa di yedi changdegi to ne, da kirantul lopre na lupchuk jing ne ni ne shi se chali ya, se cha chi ya da, ane taga tsa ma se tenzu gyu je, ane chi ari shung re, ari mi ma re, tenzu la kyabra che che, manzu la and
he says that doing this interview with you all, and he says that you all must be doing this interview with other Tibetan as well, and getting these informations. These all are like raw, true information, and when you get all this information, it's important for you guys to treasure this and then try to share this with your fellow Americans. And if we could get maximum supports from the American, so from you to the American officials and to the American government, if we could get support on our Tibetan cause, that would be so nice, and that would make him feel like it's worth it to do interviews like this.
집 땅 매고 지는 땅 주사원이네 라마서 라고면도 신문에 전다 내다 텔레 대바 땅으로 저도 좀 가져도 땅 말하라고 자시나 싫어라 아마 주스라고도 그러 되고 계속 시험하고 그렇게요 뭐로 템바를 주만하래 제가 뒤인도가 거기랑 계속 줘도는 마음 벌지 별치 벽이 내주던 때 별미마치 툭툭도 했다다 그래서 바고나지 라서 바고나지 별버지를 깨지 시가 주다 기랑도 깨지 만주는 시에 누구도 오면 됐다다 너무 말에 가르서 가와 가서 쓰지 말래 계속 드링크 깨지 시에 되서니고 부르스 레고네 됩니다
And he says that if you guys can go to Tibet, actually go to Tibet and talk to Tibetan people, then you will be able to compare whatever information you get out of these interviews and compare the actual situation over there. And but he says that if you go to Tibet and there's a central Tibetan place which is called Tibetan Baku, which is like the actual I guess the main market where everybody hangs around, and in that place if you all could go and try to talk to Tibetan people, he said that would be impossible because there are like CC cameras all over, and if you would do an interview like this with one Tibetan people, you would be in Chinese, you would be talking to a Chinese official the next day, but he just says that besides doing the interview, if you could go there once and if you could compare the information, then that would be something you guys can think about. Yeah.
그래. 나한테 내가 내 주된 저 단지라고는 시 규니 하고 거버디 딱 리미망 그 잡혀 봤어. 내가 저를 가르고 버스나 장대기 잡혀 이 직체. 그러봐. 장대기 잡혀 뒤에 미망 그 장대기 잡혀 뒤. 되고도 시숑기 잡혀 가시에 첩시 저래. 대만 좀 보고 건설. 배배내 주디 전불링나로라 총기 잘라내시 공트야 소리 차치면서 되가 오게면도 말하고 자시나. 그러봐. 대가 대매 버지 고도 건설 잡혀. 자나슈 계시 기란 쪽이 나도라 총 캡사 맞잖아. 나도 배발이 찍치기인다 돈도 소리 시야시나. 대야 오게면도 하셔나.
Yeah. And through these interviews, he hopes to get support from, like, let's say, American public, general public, not the government. And I think when I said Chinese officials or government, but that should be like a really actual route, not directly from the American government, but we hope to get support from general public, because that will be a true support, not involved in any politics or not for any business, and that a true support for a true cause. That's what he hopes for.
찍기로 니네 먼저 배배 기 탑조 지어야 돼. 세월매 시디. 먼저 그 탑조기 랑가기 락자적으로 천재라고지. 그봐. 네 가르스나 세월매보다 시디를 장대에 되게 숨들이. 만돌아 겹겨지니게 세월매봐 시디 장대도는 겹겨지고 그러다 되래. 다 대요야라. 아는 만돌에 깨제티 자나 흉내 깨제티 변화로지. 수 두머도 수 장보도 때. 아니 계란 쪽이다. 진내지 균이네니 규자데 미망 겹겨라비나 데려와. 아니 숨바들. 내가 지슈 찍디. 계지 좀이 톱단사게 되나로야. 아니 쪼로 규베 계급 dob진 상말로 서이 겹여다. 좀이 톱단사시로. 따데 아니 미망 하고 오지. 술을 좀이 톱단 민도 따들 겹여죠.
And so our approach against the Chinese government is through non-violence, peace, and truth. So we are totally based on a peaceful protest against Chinese government. So if we could get a support in this form from the American people, like we are not asking for your army, or we're not asking for nuclear power or anything, but if you could get a non-violence or a peaceful support. And he says that United States of America is one of the powerful country who participate in the UNO and talks about the basic human rights and all that. So if America could see that this country is really suffering, and then it could, help directly, because it's clearly that the human rights are not being implemented properly in China. So that would be something that he would hope for out of this kind of interviews eventually. Yeah, that's his hope, and he's what should I say, his requests.
Well, it has been an honor to speak to you today. All of us in the text program would like to thank you for your time. We hope that by recording your story and making it available, the world will learn about Tibet from your point of view.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, thank you.